Okay, excellent. Thank you. Welcome everyone to Power BI Government. Oh, I didn't update that. This is actually number 2. This is our second meetup. Thank you all for attending. Now we are actually using Teams webinar this time, so please do mute your mic when you come in. There's quite a few of us now, so it's hard for me to go through. I can mute all. I don't know if hopefully it doesn't myself. If you have any questions, you want to ask anything, feel free to drop them in the chat. But I think we'll be okay. So if there's questions at the end of the presentation, maybe just put your hand up and then I'll ask you to speak and you can unmute yourself and ask your questions. I think that'll be good and a lot more interactive than me reading out chats. So just a little bit of housekeeping. So we are using Teams webinars as a first for me, using Teams webinar. I've got a fancy little, I can put the screen up in here, which is pretty cool. But we won't be limited. So I know last time we had over 100 people and a lot of people got blocked from coming in. So we have a 300 limit now. So that's why we've moved to Teams webinar. So again, there's a lot of us here. So maybe instead of asking your questions via chat, just raise your hand and then I'll say, Bhavin, would you like to ask a question? You can just unmute yourself and ask your question to the presenters. So just a note that this session is being recorded. I will share it. I've had a few apologies already, so I will share it on the DataTale YouTube channel. So anyone who's missed the event, you can share that via the link, or if you have to leave early, you can catch the rest of the presentation over on YouTube. And so just a little bit of introduction for those who don't know me. I'm Warren Dean. I've been working in local and state government for 15 years, and I run a company called DataTale. So I provide consulting services to government in the Power BI space. So I've done a lot of Power BI training, nearly trained 300 people now, but also report development, best practice, and self-service enablement. So if you're interested in any of those services, please do reach out. You've got my email details. I'd love to have a chat to you about any of those things. But what we're here about is the community. And I do want to spruik our next event, which is coming up in the 15th of February. And so we have 3 really interesting presentations. We have Bayside Council in New South Wales. They're talking about how do we make data-driven decision-making via a portal? So how do we enable people to come to a place and view Power BI reports and work on Power BI reports together? So really interested to see that presentation. We have New South Wales Department of Planning and Industry and Environment. So we have Ed, who's a bit of a Power BI guru. He's going to be talking about REST APIs in Power BI, and he is actually going to be sharing some of that content with us. I'm really looking forward to, in terms of the administration of Power BI. So, how many people are using the Power BI reports? How do we do all that type of stuff? So he's going to do a presentation on that. And the timing is a little bit different because we have a special guest from France, Courtney. He works at the OECD, and they have done a Power BI report essentially about responses to COVID and recovery. And he's going to talk us through that report. I would encourage, if you have anyone that's kind of in the social space within your company, that's not one they want to miss. There's a lot of resources that the OECD have, and especially related to COVID response and employment, all that really social data if you're interested. So I'd encourage you to invite anyone in the social planning space to that session. So that'll be in the afternoon, 15th of February. But today for our session, oh, sorry, I didn't update that. So we have Jyoti and Mike from Melton Council. They're going to be talking about asset management dashboards. And then after that, we're going to have Dion. Oh, sorry, they're from Melton. After that, we're going to have Dion. He's from the WA Local Gov Association, and he's going to run through a presentation on the evolution of contract performance management. And then at the end of the session, I'm going to talk about how to run a Power BI project and introduce you to a framework that I've created to help you ensure that your Power BI reports are successful and used by the business and deliver insights. So for those of you, if it's your first time along to one of these events, these obviously, it's a free event. It's open to anyone in the government space. I've referring to it as a community of practice instead of a meetup, because meetups are just about seeing presentations. Community of practice is, I really want to encourage us to kind of collaborate, to work together, to share and build knowledge. I see a lot of government organizations, not rehashing, but all doing the same thing on your own. And so what I would love is to be able to connect you guys so that, if you both work on, say, Tech One, and you have Tech One scripts that you want to be able to share across organizations, I just want to be able to enable you to do that type of thing. And also want to provide, tips and learning about Power BI, custom visuals, and what's happening. And really, that's the goal of what this is. And so in terms of our collaboration, and what I would love to do is, I have set up this GitHub. I will add everyone this afternoon to it. Let me show you what it is. Sorry, so many screens here. So you don't have access yet, and you can't search it because it's private. But this is a GitHub, and really it's just a structure of folders at the moment. I am more than happy. I have zero experience with GitHub, so I'm sure I've done a lot of things wrong here. If anyone has a lot of experience with GitHub, I'm more than happy if they want to help, or as a group of people want to help to set it up. But I was actually talking to Alex Brook. I'm not sure if he's here, from City of Bunbury, but he started a position at the City of Bunbury, and he was telling me about how he's tearing his hair out because, he's trying to connect to an SQL database. He's got a 10-year-old data dictionary. He has no like the schema. He's struggling to find all this type of stuff, and he just didn't know who to talk to. And I went through the similar experience when I started in a local gov position, and I just thought it'd be fantastic if we could have a resource where people could drop things of interest to help other people in other organizations. So if you came to last couple of months ago's meetup, there was a really good presentation on Mapbox from Melton and how they were able to, use some Python scripts to update Mapbox from their GIS system. And they said they're happy to share that with us, the community, and they're going to drop that in here so that we have some reference to that. I've put a whole heap of demo Power BI files in here. So if you want to learn, play around with Power BI, these are just some self-contained files that you might find useful, and you can play around with Power BI. So that's, I suppose, my contribution to the community. But anything that you find useful in the data space, in the Power BI space, I want to give you guys access to that and to be able to collaborate on it. So that's the goal. I am looking for some, I suppose, GitHub gurus who can show me the better way to set this up and help, and your feedback. So I will grant everyone access to that this afternoon. And so the other thing I will also do is, in terms of how we can talk to one another, I didn't want to create a team because I all know you have heaps of teams and you get too many notifications as it is. I'll create a LinkedIn group here, and I'll add you all to the LinkedIn group today. And so if you want to talk, chat about something, talk about something in the GitHub, you can feel free to leave your comments there. We'll see how that goes and if that works. So that's it from me. What we're going to do is we're going to jump into presentations. Is there any questions about GitHub and sharing and collaboration? Because I'd love to see more collaboration amongst us as a group. Is there any questions before we jump into our first presentation? No? All good. Feel free to send me your questions at the end. All right, for our first presentation, we have Jyoti and Mike. They're from Melton City Council, and they're going to be talking about some asset management reports in Power BI that they've created. So, Jyoti, hopefully you can share your screen. I'll stop sharing, and I will hand over to you.
Thanks, Warren. I'm sharing my screen, and Mike, you can start. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah. Yep, we can see that.
Right. Mike?
Excellent. Thank you, Jyoti. So, hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, firstly, Warren, for organising this event. I'm Mike Johnston. I work at Melbourne City Council in the engineering services team. Today, I'll share the team's experience developing a couple of dashboards to assist the council's asset data workflow. So, doing this presentation is Jyoti Bandari, who's our Engineering Innovation and Integration Specialist, and also myself, the Coordinator of Asset Management and GIS. So I'm going to go through more the context about why these Power BI dashboards were necessary, and Jyoti will demonstrate and explain the more technical nature of what we've done. I'll get you to jump to the next slide, Jyoti. So a bit of context around the city of Melton and where we're at. So we lie in the western suburbs of Melbourne, so a fairly large council. We're one of the 7 developing councils, so we're growing rather quickly. We've got an over $200 million worth of acquired assets annually, so that's between capital and gifted. So that increase over the last 5-year period has been 5-fold. So because of the massive increase of assets, so I think last year we had over 20,000 new assets that ended up in our asset register. It meant the need to kind of look over our existing practices, look at where the pain points were, and come up with a bit of a plan to how to rectify some of these pain points and have more automated systems. So next slide, please, Johnny. So in order to kind of review the whole asset data workflow process, to create efficiencies and address some of the pain points, we established the Asset Data Workflow Project to implement a number of solutions across the 6 phases you can see there. So project completion, so that's when we first receive the asset data from either the subdivisional developer, or it can be from internal staff for minor or major capital delivery. That handover process needed to be improved as well as the validation of some of the assets that came through that process. We needed a method to review data import, data for import, because we had a lot of our own attributes to that, the different asset categories. So we've got around 30 asset categories that we maintain in our asset registers. So the project included adoption of an asset validation portal, improved asset handover documentation, and also a semi-automated asset importing tool for council's asset register. Whilst looking for solutions to review and visualise asset data, a number of council staff within the engineering team undertook Power BI training with Warren and DataTale. So that came at quite a timely time for us, because it was as we're going through this project, and the skills that we learnt through that training we were able to put into action with the development of 2 separate dashboards. So we can see we've got the ASPEC review dashboard, which really is in that yellow section, so the data review for import. But we also decided that it was also the perfect tool for the creation of a state of an assets dashboard. So this gives a bit of a snapshot of where our assets, what our assets in the register are. So not only the overall assets, but also the assets we're importing on a yearly basis. So the first project was this ASPEC review dashboard. So I guess beforehand, it was a very cumbersome method we were utilizing. So we were able to automate over 100 different CSV files, but this required manual handling, and basically it's going into each of these CSV files to see that the asset data was correct. So the nightly script would run, extract that data and put that in a register for us to review. We would have to, open that up, that CSV file up in Excel, do kind of a filter in each of those columns to make sure the asset attributes that were populated in those columns meet the classification restrictions that we have put on each of those attributes. And we also had to do some cross-referencing of tables because of the asset IDs. We do sequentially through our asset IDs, so we haven't got a specific asset ID for footpaths or roads because they run sequential. Sometimes with multiple people adding new assets, it means some of those asset IDs were crossed over between multiple different asset categories. So this was the existing solution before we decided to use Power BI as that review dashboard. And I'll pass across to Jyoti, who'll explain the solution that we derived at for this.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, as Mike mentioned, this aspect dashboard is designed and developed to ensure all the assets use the same naming convention, have accurately populated classification, construction dates. So this dashboard has been set up to assist in reviewing the data before import to our asset management register. And also this dashboard is used by our officer within the asset management and GIS team. So the nightly script runs, which download the profiles for all the asset data within our asset management register, and the data profiles are recreated as a tables that sits on our database within a Council SQL server environment. And Power BI, which directly reference these data sets. However, within the backend of the dashboard, we have had to cross-reference different SQL table to achieve the desired output. Data is then saved using Power Query Editor to meet our needs, enabling us to create a clean and concise visual report to share within our team. Data analysis expression, or DAX, were used to create calculated columns, measures, and custom tables. So on this slide, you can see the partial view of the dashboards, but at the end of the presentation, I'm taking you all to our actual dashboard and probably for a better visualization. Also, as Mike mentioned, data integrity is very critical when we deal with asset worth more than 2.4 billion and about 200 million worth of asset is added each year. And most of our units within Council are relied on our data. So once we begin to use this dashboard, we realize that we made a lot of human errors when entering data manually. So this dashboard allows officers to easily track the mistakes and fix it accordingly. So the asset data, once imported into register, is used throughout the organization. As I mentioned, a simple error can lead to the wrong decision making. So it is very, very important. We have very similar naming convention, have accurately populated classification, construction date for all of the asset categories. And also this dashboard is automatically refreshed every day, updating data from SQL environment, which eliminate manually checking SQL database. Overall, this automated system of checking data saves a lot of time and the quality data is achieved, which allow our team to upload data more frequently. Back to you, Mike.
Thanks, Jyoti. So the final phase, I guess, in that asset data workflow was really a visualization tool for what's in our register. So previously we had a PDF version. So some of those images you can see on that screen are just screenshots of a PDF document we used to distribute. So that used to take time to extract the figures out and populate graphs and yeah. So it used to take a little while to produce that annually. So I guess my team being asset management and also GIS, we've got a lot of different skill sets to be able to extract data sets from our SQL database. So we thought having all those, the asset data sitting within our GIS databases, then it would be a great idea to use that data to populate a Power BI dashboard as well. So it's a great tool to not only use within our team, but we could actually distribute the Power BI dashboard more widely for the executive staff, but also council officers who need to, say, quote the number of the length of the footpaths currently into a report or a document or even a presentation. So the Power BI dashboard will create a useful tool, not just within our team, but also with outside the team. So having a solution that was more widely distributed and used was part of what we wanted to get to. So I'll hand back to Jyoti, who'll go through the solution that we came up with.
Thanks, Mike. So as Mike mentioned, rather than producing those PDF documents every year, we created a very smart solution using Power BI dashboard that really tells all the story that we wanted to tell. And also Melton Council was looking to find a smart solution, something like this. So we chose Power BI at the end. So it is very easily accessible and user friendly, and people can slice and dice to find the information that they want. And the dashboard also reflect all the asset, the valuation, the total valuation, and also the total asset added each financial year. And again, this dashboard refreshes automatically, similar to other dashboards. So this is you can see on the screen. So this is what it looked like, but I'm again happy to show you at the end. So instead of the dashboard, I think we soon going to be launching this dashboard to our council staff, exec, and also councillor, and also our asset register are growing at such a rate it's hard to keep up. So hopefully this dashboard would be a very smart solution to keep up with the data. Also. It's important. Also important was working out what data we want to communicate, and also how best to display the data. And also we've done a lot of trial and error, and we're still refining it. So this is something it looks like at the moment. It's fully operational. This dashboard is working, but again we try to refine it as we move on. So on this state of the asset dashboard, we made an attempt to use all the asset categories, but again, as Mike mentioned, we got more than 32 asset categories, so it was quite hard to fit in one dashboard. So what I mean to say is a lot of those asset categories use different network measure, different unit, and different valuation method. So at the end, we established this dashboard with fewer asset categories, which are very critical to share with our internal staffs. And also we realized the dashboard layout is quite important. So we, as I said, we originally had many pictures and many slices and cards, but at the end we found using a simple card and basic visualization was easier for the user to follow. So I'll quickly bring our dashboard in here. I hope everyone can see my screen. So this is our ASPEC QA review dashboard. Obviously, we don't have all the asset category because every quarter we do bulk import of the data. So once we reach to the stage, we probably see all the asset category. And again, the first page is we're trying to find if there is any blank asset ID, any blank asset name, any duplicate asset ID. So you can choose each asset categories, and it'll tell you. So our officer who is importing data can quickly realize, oh, we duplicate asset ID, or we get a blank asset name or whatever, so that they can go back and fix it. So we got several pages. We got classification, and also we checking all the measurement, and again the valuation as well. And this is our state of the asset dashboard. And again, this is the total replacement cost of the asset that's been added within last year, and total network measure, which is added in last financial year. And we got the total, sorry, if I can untitle this, you can see our total cost of our asset. So we can go into each asset category, see how much we added this financial year. And also we got a little picture of, this is our actual picture of one of our footpath within our city. And also we got asset type breakdown, also asset condition, which is quite critical for our staff, internal staff, to make some important decision. And also we got the condition audit timeline. So for example, a footpath, we've done a condition audit in 2020. So next one will be 2024, and so on and so forth. So we got a little picture for all asset categories. And again, this dashboard would be refreshed every year with the information updated accordingly. Thank you very much. And we're happy to take any questions. Sorry, Warren, you unmute.
Thanks, Jyoti. So if you have any questions, please do raise your hand, and then I just ask you to introduce yourself, where you're from, and then feel free to ask your question. So Nick Weir, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thanks, Warren. Thanks, Mike and Jyoti. Interesting presentation. I'm sure asset management is something we're all super interested in getting a bit more across. I have two questions. One, just a real quick one around what sort of licensing you guys have at Melton, if you're just doing like a per user pro license, or if you've upgraded to premium. And then the second question was just a little bit more around the data process right at the start around the SQL. You mentioned you run a bunch of SQL extracts overnight that then get stored into your asset register. And I was just wondering kind of which two data sources or storage locations you're using for that. Like, is it coming out of an asset system that someone's updated at the end of project completion?
I might answer that last one, Nick. So I think twice a week, we run a extract out of our asset register, which creates tables in our SQL environment of all our assets within those registers. So that Power BI of the State of the Assets dashboard is fairly live. It's a couple of times a week that will get updated.
So it's just pointing at like a data warehouse type situation as opposed to a direct system. Yeah.
So we've got a number of tables that gets extracted into our SQL database, and then in order to populate the Power BI dashboard, made the merge within SQL of those tables to get the data that we need to populate the dashboard with.
Okay.
So because a lot of the GIS layers are created from our what's in our asset registers.
Yep.
So it gets split up on our SQL database in all of the different asset categories. So we've got to look at how we're going to merge them and have the right information. And it was a little bit tricky to get the right information because we had to make sure as we're showing all the data from the last 12 months, that the data construction or whatever gets populated against each of those categories and a few other issues that we had.
Yeah, for sure.
And just to answer your first question, Nick, we're using the Pro licenses per user. So we started out with 1 or 2 people, and as we are sort of exploring and expanding, we started adding more licenses, and the IT is looking into the premium licensing options as a next step forward.
Yeah, we're in the same boat.
Excellent. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks.
Jerry, would you like to go next and just let us know where you're from? Oh,
You're on mute,
sorry,
Jerry.
you're on mute, Jerry.
Oh, sorry, guys. I'm Jerry from the city of Stonington. So I've been working in the GI space for a while now. Just the guys, fantastic job on what you're doing, especially with the extensive assets you're working on. I think the initial question, Nick sort of asked the same question initially that I had, but another one was in the visualization or the validation stage when you receive the data and you use Power BI to validate that information. How's that information then put into the asset register? And is the asset register in SQL? Is it elsewhere on the cloud, or how's that work?
Yeah, we've got a cloud, a static cloud as our asset registers. So we've got I mentioned the validation tool. We've got ACDC that does the validation of the asset information that we get from developers. We add our own asset information, which we use this Power BI dashboard to make sure that all the data that we've added, or the attribute data we've added to those assets, is correct before we've got a semi-automated import into our registers using it's a QGIS plugin.
Okay. So, mate, a lot of that's initially when you validate the information in Power BI, then it's a manual task initially, and it's sort of an automated task to then upload.
Yeah, so we do our data attribute addition in QGIS. So then they use this Power BI dashboard to check that all the data is correct across all those different categories. And then it gives us a bit of a green flag to then be able to use that QGIS import to import the assets into a set of cloud. So it's just you select the asset category, select the assets that want to be imported, and then it'll push those asset information into the register.
Perfect. And the second question was with regards to visualization of the spatial data. Have you got intentions of putting some of the GIS data in the Power BI outputs as well?
We looked at that. We'll probably need a separate page within Power BI to do that. There's only so much, and we're really keen to have a really user-friendly interface that people could use and was, could use easily. We found a lot of, we've still got Intramaps as our tool they can access for more the mapping data, but we thought this was a different way of explaining, because we think how they're going to use this Power BI compared to a traditional GIS is they just want simple figures and look up simple things. If they want more details, then they can go to the Intramaps for that.
And just to add to that, any Power BI mapping solution has a cap of 30,000 points, so that sort of limits to sort of develop anything within Power BI environment as a mapping interface. So that's something to note for the rest of the group.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Jerry. And Ian, if you'd like to ask a question, just let us know where you're from.
Absolutely. Ian from Brisbane City Council. Thank you for hosting this particular topic. I know that asset handover and asset registers is a fairly popular discussion across all the different council, and we're certainly going through our own challenges here, being such a large organisation. I'm keen to, this question is more related to a process type of question. I'm keen to understand where the data inputs are coming from, is that through someone actually doing, for example, your larger assets, say newly constructed buildings to asphalt or street, whatever, does that come through a certain department? And what about, for example, developer contributed assets? How does that data make its way to your register? I'm assuming it's coming from a different branch, different area?
No, that's all within our team. So we're lucky enough to have, I guess, the strategic asset management, and that, and we deal with developers and the capital projects for the handover of that. And we manage the process right through. So it's kind of good having, I guess, that whole asset data workflow within the one team, because we can kind of manage that as a whole.
What about your maintenance? So who provides the updated asset condition rating?
We also do condition auditing from within the team as well and get that data. Yep. We're currently out, and I think tomorrow I've got meetings for determining a new maintenance solution where a lot of the maintenance information will come back for more of those minor assets, but for some of those major ones, we do every 4 years with a rolling program for do condition auditing. Okay. And that's done, internally.
Great.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Jyoti. Really appreciate well thought out presentation. And what I love is, quality controls within Power BI and how you can use it as a tool just to do data quality checks, which is so essential. So thank you. Appreciate your presentation. Thanks, guys. Next up, we have Dion. And so Dion's from WA Local Gov Association. So Dion, I'll let you, I'll stop sharing. I'll let you share your screen, and thank you for presenting with us.
All right. Thank you, Warren, for giving me this opportunity. So can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. So what I'll be going through today is the evolution of contract management, or contract performance management here at Walga. So in terms of what I'll be going through today, is that it's essentially what I'll be presenting to you is what we call the submission report, and what I'm going to go through is just what has happened and what is currently happening and what I feel is the next stepping stones. So just to give you a bit of background on about myself first. So as you can see, my name's Dion. I'm a contract analyst at the WA Local Government Association, or WALGA. So I'm within the procurement team here. So in terms of my national counterparts, so I'm normally dealing with MAV at the procurement, within their procurement arm. Local buy and LGP in New South Wales, or local government procurement. So for those of you that don't know, WALGA, so our equivalents in other states are MAV and LGAS, SA in South Australia, or LGAQ in Queensland, for example. So those are our national counterparts. Just to give you a bit of context there. So in terms of the submission report itself, the target audience is our contract managers, and basically the whole point of this report is just to be used in weekly meetings as a discussion item. Primarily it tracks the performance of our contracts over a quarter, and also it's there to notify our contract managers if there's any issues with our suppliers as well throughout the quarter, so that they can do their own supplier management. And then in terms of the background and what was handed over to me when I first took over this to actually produce this report, was that there was 3 main spreadsheets copied into multiple weekly folders, and it was just a whole heap of mixture of graphs and tables. It was definitely a manual process of just trying to create the final report. And the data source that it was coming from was an on-premise dynamic CRM that was stored on an offsite VM. So that was a joy to actually try and get some real-time data, which wasn't really the case for me. And also it was actually done by, well, the actual report was actually produced by our contracts administrator.
Perfect.
Sorry about that, a bit of technical difficulties. So in terms of my thought process on how to develop this report, basically it falls into two parts, which is the one is the business process, and that is like, how was the report created in the first place, and could I improve the efficiency of creating the report? And also, when it comes to the report designing, what questions did I need to answer from this report? And what visuals did I need to be using as well to actually bring to answer those questions? So I'll go ahead into my report just to show you the actual reports. So what you see here, this is all demo data. And basically, in terms of like, this was the first cut of the actual report. And in terms of like the graphs and tables that he was producing, it was these four visuals here. And imagine all of these three graphs split into their own graphs itself. So there would be like 9 graphs and a table here just showing what it would be like. So that was what I initially had the first cut. And then from there, so in the actual design, and what was, as with each iteration of it, and with talking to our contract managers a bit more and seeing like what I wanted, they wanted to add in like the quarterly budgets and see how that's faring. And then from here, they wanted it broken down into the various different contracts, and seeing what our suppliers have been submitting, and how does that compare to the quarterly budget. And also, I guess that this was more of an add-on, this visual here, or this page here, and this is just showing like how in terms of the like the overall view on the year. So this is more taken up by our senior management, and then of course I wanted a bit more breakdown on a quarterly basis. So at this point it was good for what it was, but then it was becoming very muddied in the sense that it just needs to be held back, and it was moving away from its original purpose. So there was also a restructure in our contracts as well, which sort of brought a chance to change the whole submission report. So in terms of like the new submission report and where it's at now, so this is where it's at now. So a bit cleaner in that respect, and basically saying the same information but slightly different. But in terms of from a contract manager's point of view, we've also added like all the different like where all the income can be coming from as well. So we can see here in this visual, we can see like all our like suppliers that haven't reported yet and the potential income that can be coming in. We've got our contract managers and seeing how much they have left on the table. So it's a bit of, as you can see, like they can see it in a snapshot of what's happening as of this point. And as you can see, yeah, it's a dashboard report type style. And as I go, and then as an end result, by the end of it, I dropped it down to 2 Excel spreadsheets. So one is downloaded from the Dynamics CRM, and then there was like a budget file, which is what I get from the finance team, and then do all the data manipulation within Power BI. And also from the actual report, I make it exportable from the PDF. There is minimal manual handling now, so all the formulas, all the copy and pasting is now gone. This is by no means the best report in terms of like best practice at the moment, but it's better than what we had before. So in terms of the stepping stones, in terms of the outcomes, Firstly, I had the comment of like, why didn't I handed this over earlier by contract administrators? So compared to what they did to what we have now, it's definitely a lot better. It's been used at an executive level and above, to the point that it's been used at our what we call our financial and services meeting, which is run by our elected members. There's been a spike in interest in the data from my contract managers, so they're asking for more. Also, this report is beginning to open up doors to other business units, just with the help of their data needs as well. So it's like creating pockets within the organization, and also like for me personally, it has helped me like redesign like the core like Power BI data model and make it a bit more efficient. Because if you had looked at the back end at what I already had, it was just a lot of like spaghetti relationships going all over the place. So it did help me like redesign it properly. And also in terms of the stepping stones, and where I wanted to take this is that I definitely want to automate the submission report by connecting to our new Dynamics 365 system. So to give you context for everyone, like at Walga, we're currently going through a digital transformation. So and a lot of it's just to improve our systems that we're currently using. And so automating and Dynamics 365 is going to be a big core of it, especially within our team. So moving on from there, definitely want to improve the visibility of our contracts by giving our contract managers a lot more through like a lot more data products, and also providing value proposition for both our suppliers and our members through analytics. So currently, as part of this like new digital transformation, we're looking at like member portals and supplier portals as well down the track. So and also giving our contract managers like the data they need at the fingertips as well. So what I mean by that is that when they go out on the road, they're able to pull up a report when they need to. And also, but I guess like for me as a selfish goal within this organization is just to improve the overall organizational data maturity within the organization. So, and I feel as if by using this submission report and showing it within the organization, it's getting that traction gradually and moving on. So that's the end of my presentation. So any questions?
Thanks, Dion. Any questions from anybody? Just raise your hand if you have a question. Yes, Nick?
Yeah, just jump in and ask more questions. So the first one was around, you mentioned at the end of the presentation there, the report being used by executive.
Yep.
I just wanted to touch base and see, I suppose, what sort of appetite your executive has had for Power BI and using that in the meetings, and if there was any sort of change management or training that you had to do. Was it an easy or hard process?
So in terms of like getting the executive, it was just a matter of just like basically what happened was that in a team meeting, like it was like shown, and my executive manager just happened to be there. And he was quite impressed with it. So basically, it was just a roll-on effect from there. Once they saw the value of it, it's slowly being used throughout the organization. So there is another report that I've used that is basically once a quarter that's being used by the execs itself, just to go through like some KPIs that they're using. So that's been like, and also in terms of like my own personal training, or training within like the organization, it's all been through, I think from a bit similar to yourself from your presentation, it's like more being like all the YouTube, like self-learning way that I've been like doing it as well. So, so in terms of like formal training, I haven't really had like any like in particular. So yeah, so hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. Are you having like executive accessing the reports through the Power BI service and through workspaces, or are you creating like shortcuts or bookmarks or links for them to be able to get to it quicker without having to go through that process?
At the moment, it's on an ad hoc basis. So all we're doing is just bringing our laptops and sharing on the screen. Like they don't have any access to it at this point. Okay. When like in terms of our infrastructure, we're probably at least a good year away from providing that sort of that sort of access at the moment.
Okay. Yeah. Still good that they're engaging with the reports. Yeah. We have some managers and executives have a bigger appetite for it than others.
Yeah.
So it's been a interesting experience to try and get all the buy-in from everyone across the board.
Yeah. Because I know that. Yeah. No worries.
Alex, would you like to introduce yourself and ask your question?
Hey, Bunbury. In Western Australia, only been here for a few months, so this is local government's all very new to me. Power BI is not new to me, but local government is. Particularly curious, being that you're from Walga. Just in the context of transformation, I'm curious whether part of the original scope of that, if there is a formal sort of roadmap defined for your transformation, or as a result of you sort of putting Power BI in front of the executive, has it been, is analytics part of that transformation scope?
In terms of the transformation, well, it's going to be part of our strategic plan going forward. I do know, talking to our IT manager, he has put it on the table. So as part of our five-year plan for the next 5 years, yeah, it's definitely like on the table. And in terms of its usage, like moving forward. So yeah, I guess like in short, yes, it is like pretty much on the table there in terms of our own digital transformation.
Okay. How big is Walga? I don't want to go too far off scope into inquiring about your organisation, but how big is Walga? How many people are you talking about for your audience or potential audience?
In terms of our audience, in terms of staff, we're about 100 strong, and we and depending which business units you're in, we've got people like around the state as well. In terms of our potential audience, like we've got basically every single like local government are our members, so we help them like from the industry. So there is potential there in terms of it could be, depending on like how many local government staff there is, we could be interacting to a lot of people,
sure,
like including yourself.
So in theory, you could be having conversations with the local government councils around, the sort of things you're doing with Power BI reporting. Is that?
Potentially. So we haven't explored that far, but we've got our own internal digital transformation. But hey, like we can definitely like hook up like after this if you want to have a chat.
Sounds good. Thanks, Dion.
No worries.
Excellent. Thanks, Dionne. I appreciate. Great presentation. Thank you. I suppose another answer to Nick's question as well is some of the organizations I've worked with is, we have like a 10-minute LMS video so that the management can learn how to, how do I bookmark a page? How do I use a filter? How do I drill through? So the very basics of Power BI and just put it in an LMS in part of their learning management strategy. So that's another option that is available to you. Some fantastic questions. So I didn't allocate enough time for your questions. So thank you for the questions. I'm going to jump into my presentation now, but I understand other people have requirements and you need to jump off. This is being recorded and I will send you the link if you want to catch up with my 15-minute presentation. But otherwise, I'll push on, and I'm not offended if you need to jump off into another meeting. Completely understand. So I'll continue on and I'll try to allocate a bit more time our next meetup for questions. So in my presentation, sorry, let me just sort my screens out. So am I sharing? Hang on, let me share that again. Share this one. Awesome. Sorry, too many screens, just moving them all around. So my presentation's about how to run a Power BI project. Dion gave a really good example where he was talking about, I've built out this report, I showed it to my manager, and then my manager's like, this is great, what about this, what about that? And you get to a point where, you know, your Power BI project never ends because people are loving what you're doing, they're seeing what you're doing, and all of a sudden they're adding additional requirements which were never scoped at the start. So how do we actually control a Power BI project? How do we actually close out a Power BI project? And these are some of the things that I want to talk about in this presentation. So how to run a Power BI project. So myself, I've run nearly 100 Power BI projects within a government context. And this presentation, it's a 15-minute, very, very high-level abstract of actually a one-day hands-on PD that I run, which is all about introduction to the methodology and how we run a project in the data space, especially of Power BI. And I've run this at Ballarat and Glenelg and councils, which have got a lot of feedback that they've really enjoyed that process, and helping people along that data maturity and understanding the process of working with data. So if anyone's interested, in a one-day PD for introduction in methodology and running Power BI projects, please do let me know. But in essence, I'm going to talk about why do projects fail, and a framework to help us run a project, especially in the space of Power BI. So this is the methodology that I'm going to talk you through. I've run a lot of projects, and a lot of my projects have been successful, delivered a lot of insights. A lot of my projects have fallen over on their face and been complete flops. And so what I want to do is help you avoid the complete flops and make sure that your project has uptake by the business, it's delivering insights, and it's doing what you want to do. So this methodology is not purely created by myself. I have developed this, but it is based off, if you see in the bottom right there, CRISP-DM. So CRISP-DM is quite an old framework. It's more to do with data science. So the DM stands for data mining. But what I've done is I have adopted this framework and I've made it applicable for Power BI based on my experiences of documenting where projects have fallen over and placed them into certain gateways. And so what you can see here is it's kind of a circular framework. We start at business understanding, defining the scope, defining the stakeholders. We move to data understanding, where we have a look at the data, understand the context of the data, clean prep the data, data visualization, data storytelling, and then we come to evaluate. Now, you can move in between any of these and go backwards and forwards, but at evaluate, you will then decide, am I going to close this project off, or have I found something else interesting that I need to go back to the business? So you can run around the circle a few times, but eventually you want to close out this project and deploy it and close your hands off it. We don't want to be working on Power BI projects forever, and that's where we deploy and we pitch. So what I'm going to take you through is this. If you are interested in this, like the image of the methodology, I'll drop this link in the chat. You can download it from here. So it's just a simple PDF, which has what we're going to cover today at a high level. So I'll drop that in the chat for everybody. And you can feel free to grab the PDF that I'll be talking to from here. So jump back into here. So I always like to start presentation with some stats. So through 2020, 90% of corporate strategies will explicitly mention information as a critical enterprise asset and analytics as an essential competency. And there's 100 people in this meeting, and I'm sure you have heard somebody talk about being data-driven, making data decisions, and you would have had it in some type of strategy. And so this is a report in 2019 that was done by Gartner that said that even though businesses are doing this, only 20% of analytic insights will deliver business outcomes. And if we flip that on its head, we could say that 80% of your effort in the analytics space will not deliver any benefit to your organization. And that's a really hard sell, to sell to your manager. I'm going to spend 10 days working on analytics and Power BI, and 2 of those days are going to deliver value, and the rest of it's going to be a waste of time. And this presentation is all about how do we identify and run a project that it's actually going to fall into the 20% where it actually delivers value to the business. So these are my top 4 reasons for data project failures. So not involving the business, not knowing how to get the data, lack of executive buy-in, and poor data integrity. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump through some of these, and these are, again, based on my personal experience. There's a lot more reasons that a project can fail. So number 1, not involving the business. So the approach of if we build it, they will come does not work. Trust me, they will not come. They will actually fight you tooth and nail not to use what you've built if you don't involve them from the start. A data project should never be about data. It should always be about the business. And that's a really important concept to understand. A motto that I like to talk about is, we don't solve data problems, we solve business problems. And so what are those business problems? What are the pain points? What are the roadblocks? What are the issues of the business? If this is the focus of our Power BI report, and we saw some before, it was automating a process, removing data sources, showing data quality issues with our data. The result will be that the business will have a huge buy-in to your report because you are solving their problems rather than just getting carried away looking at data and solving data problems. Oops, sorry, there's a few more points in there. Having defined requirements. So whenever we run a Power BI project, we should define the requirements at the start. So a BRD, which is a business requirements document, having a document where you can define the scope, define the audience, what are the KPIs, how often do I have to refresh this data? All these type of things need to be defined at the start. The next one's talking about having a key stakeholder, right? Who are the people in the business who actually understand the context of the data that we're going to work on? If I can give an example, I was working on a Power BI report, extracted some data from SQL, presented it to the business, and they're like, no, that's all completely wrong. Why was it wrong? There was a particular field in the database that at 2017, at some point, they just started recording something different in it. I had no idea. I had no idea of the context of the business, the context of the data. And so being able to have a key stakeholder who can explain, if it's not you, someone else who can explain all those data nuances is really important. So the second one is not knowing how to get the data. So is the data stuck within a system? Is it within the cloud? Is it on premise? How do I get access to that data is always a big issue. And another one is, does the data even exist? I've worked with a lot of people who are, maybe doing surveys and they need to think about, are we actually asking the correct questions to answer that? Am I even asking the question in the survey? Am I introducing bias in the survey? So there's a lot of considerations in about how do we actually get the data? If the data is out there in a public sphere, can we get access to it? I want to quickly show you an amazing link. I know you've all used Google before, but this is dataset search in Google. I'll copy this link and I'll drop it in the chat for you. This is an amazing resource. If ever someone comes and asks you, do you have some data on this or that? If I say, for example, I want to look at Glenelg and I want to see if there's any data, public data available on trees, and I can search in here, and here it shows me. So it's searching the web for data sources. that are free and I can connect to and use and reference. So if ever you are looking for data, don't do a normal Google search. Make sure you have the data set search within Google, and you can check, last updated. I just want tabular data. I want images. I want text. Is it free to use or commercial? Just thought I'd share that as a really good resource that I do use whenever you're looking for data. The third one is lack of executive buy-in. So projects don't always go according to plan. Sometimes you'll have a change of direction. Sometimes your project's going to go over budget, over time. What happens when you need strong support from your key executives? Sometimes, you're going to get pushback. You're going to get people who don't want to use your Power BI report. If you don't have executive buy-in from the start, you are always going to have issues in terms of getting uptake and use of your Power BI report. We always have to remember that the business has conflicting priorities, and they might not be interested in using the Power BI report because they've got their BAU that they want to use. So this is always something that we need to consider. So who's the executive when push comes to shove? Who is going to be able to help people to use it? Because sometimes when you're working within the business, people are scared. Are you going to find out, one, that I'm doing something wrong, two, that I'm not doing my job efficiently? People are scared when really we're just trying to help them do their jobs better. And instead of playing around with Excel spreadsheets, actually spend the time making decisions from that data instead of manipulating data. And that's really one of the goals of our Power BI reports. And the fourth one is poor data integrity. So there's a popular saying, garbage in, garbage out. That is especially true for us in the data world. So poor data quality and accuracy will be a major obstacle to the success of our data project. If we have a look at some stats, this one is from KPMG. They did a research paper. 84% of CEOs are concerned about the quality of the information that they are using to make business decisions. So they're all for using, the lingo, let's be data driven, but they don't actually trust the data that is coming in. Why, we saw in that earlier presentation, it's so important that we have Power BI data quality checks. So we are checking that data is being used correctly. It's been filled out, the data entry is being done, or however it's being brought in is being checked. Gartner research found that poor data quality is the reason for the failure of 40% of business initiatives. And so, that's a huge issue if you think about, yes, anyone can build a Power BI report, but if that Power BI report is built off poor quality data, we're going to have serious issues in terms of the business making decisions based on wrong data. And if they find that out at the end, that's not going to reflect good on you or the community's view of what you guys are doing. So the second point there, Dion was talking about, data maturity, encouraging the business to treat data as an asset. There's lots of times, and I'm not having to go at customer service, I'm just using it as an example. Everyone is busy, they're taking in requests, and they tag everything with that dreaded other option. So this is a request about tree, other, because it's just easier or it's the first option in the list. They are not understanding that data is actually an asset that our business is collecting. Later on down the track, someone's going to be making decisions from this data. If I don't do the data entry correctly, there's going to be flow-on effects for us as a business. So we really need to lift the data maturity of our businesses. And the last one there is talking about data issues early. So we want to identify our data issues right from the start, not after we've created the Power BI report and people have started to use it. That's really going to be terrible if people are making decisions off a Power BI report that has poor data quality inside of it. So these are some common reasons for data project failures. What we have a look, so I've listed about 4, but there's some other ones in terms of, poor data visualization, using the wrong data visualization to tell something which is making it misleading, misapplication of analytics, not training, which was some of the questions that were asked before. So people who are using the Power BI reports, so not us as Power BI builders, but people who are using the Power BI reports don't actually know how to navigate a Power BI report, or they're not comfortable with it. They don't know how to use a filter. They don't know how to bookmark something, and then it all becomes too hard and they don't want to use it. So all of these things are important considerations that we need to think about when we're doing a Power BI project. So in essence, that brings us back to this data analysis development methodology and all the different stop points that we have along the line. So if we have a look at this, business understanding, I should have determined who is the executive that's going to support this project at the start. I should have worked with the business to determine what are the KPIs, what are the blockers. All this should have been done when we're developing what's referred to as a business requirement document. Moving into the next one, data understanding, we need a stakeholder, someone from the business who understands all the nuances of the data. Poor data integrity, this is something that we can, if we can't fix it at the source, we need to clean up in our Power BI reports within Power Query, within the poor data integrity. Poor communication in terms of how do I communicate my Power BI reports? How do I use colors? How do I use the correct charts? How do I have a corporate brand for what we're doing? All these types of considerations for a project. And then we come here to the inability to pivot. So inability to pivot is all about, can I close this project off or not? Do I need to go back to the business and say, hey, hang on a minute, I've identified X, Y, and Z. Is this correct, or is it a data issue? And so we might find something that's interesting. One thing I didn't mention in business understanding is getting the business to identify hypotheses. So we believe that we've increased our capital works budget by X and we've not delivered by Y, and we will go out and test that hypothesis. We will build a Power BI report, and then we can say, yes, what you're saying is true, or what you're saying is not true. So we validate our hypotheses here, and if it's correct, we can go on, and if it's not, we can go back to the business, and then we might need to go back through this process again. So we can go through this many times, but once we're happy here, the business is happy, this is where we go about closing off a report. So in the deployment or the pitch, so we want to publish our report to Power BI service. How do we share it? What's the licensing? How does the workspaces work? We would set all of that up. And if I reference back to Dion, where he's done his Power BI report, he's showing it to the management, and then the management are like, this is great. What about this and this and this and this? And then what happens is, and I experience this a lot, these Power BI reports just become, living reports that I can never close off and never tick off in terms of I've completed this Power BI report. So having our scope defined in business understanding allows us then go back to the business and say, yes, that's fantastic. I would love to do that. Let's do this in another phase of the project so that I can actually close off my deliverables, and then we'll scope it out again. I think it's a fantastic idea. So if you never define that scope at the start, you can never close your project at the end. So business understanding is the most critical aspect of whenever you're delivering a Power BI report. So deployment and pitch, how we get it off, how do we set up the refreshes, and also what's important for us is how do we now pitch it to the business? How do we show the Power BI report? How do we equip them with training in terms of using the Power BI report? And this, I suppose, in terms of time, I've done a very high level in terms of a one-day kind of PD and how we go through in terms of this methodology. So there's a few other slides, but in terms of that, maybe I can talk in more aspect about that at the end. But for those of you, thank you who've stuck through to the end. I know we've gone over time. So maybe what I'll do is I will close off this presentation and I'll stick around for questions at the end. But if anyone is interested in running a PD with that type of stuff, please let me know. We've got some really good feedback in terms of data maturity. So how do we run a project, thinking about data as an asset and all those types of things. So Just a reminder, we have our next meetup in February. I'll send you an email with all the details, but really love to see you along to that. Some really interesting presentations, and I will try to keep us on time next time. But essentially, that is it for me in terms of presentation. I know a lot of you have to head off, so thank you all so much for attending. I will stick around if anyone does have any questions. Feel free to ask them. I will stop the recording now. But thanks everyone. I'll send an email to kind of sum up the presentation and give you some of that content.